Ooh, gotta have some more coffee so I can make this coherent. I stayed up till like 4 o'clock in the morning playing Dragon Ball Xenoverse Hero Coliseum, so I'm out of it. All right, let's check out the progress that I've made on the guitar so far. So if you watched the previous mod section of this video, you would know that I have chosen to do a very inexpensive paint on this guitar, and partially because I wanted to just experiment with it, but also this is a cheap guitar. It was only $200 for the guitar, brand new. Not knocking the guitar, it's great, but I wanted to spend a small amount of money doing all this stuff, because like if I started adding on lots and lots of stuff, then it almost defeats the purpose of buying a cheap guitar. But I used Rust-Oleum Accents, or American Accents 2X, which 2X just, I think it's just supposed to mean twice the coverage. And I will say that it is pretty accurate. You saw in the previous video I did 2 coats of yellow, so I followed the directions on the can very explicitly, because I've seen some bad results on this kind of stuff if you don't follow the directions on the can. So when you saw that paint clip from the first video, I did a coat of yellow after I scuff sanded the guitar, and then I went and waited 30 minutes, and then I sprayed yellow on it again. I probably could have gotten away with 1 coat of yellow, but I wanted to just be safe. So then I waited about 12 hours or so, and then I went in and very, very lightly just kind of scuff sanded it with I think 1000 grit sandpaper dry. I mean, just like enough pressure to hold it onto the block, and that is it. And I was very careful when I started. I started on a place that was not going to be so noticeable, like behind the neck plate, just to make sure. But this finish dries pretty quick, or at least dry enough that you can kind of start doing a little leveling on it. And the reason I scuff sanded it kind of with the 1000 grit paper is, one, I mean, it needs to be scuff sanded before you spray another coat on so they can mechanically adhere. But also I wanted to make sure that, because I put a fair bit of paint on it, I wanted to make sure that it kind of was open and could be gassing off, drying out. And that's worked really well. I've done that with every time I've done a coat of paint. I've waited about 12 hours or so, and then just very, very lightly sanded it to make sure that it would dry. And so far, that's worked really well. Here's where we're at now. So, as you can see, the body is essentially done. I did 2 coats of the yellow, waited 12 hours, did a little bit of sanding, and then I waited 48 hours before I did any more painting. Then after 48 hours, I taped it up. I wanted to make sure it was good and dry. I also made sure to tape inside the cavity first, where it wasn't going to show, to make sure that the tape wasn't going to peel the paint off or have some kind of reaction with it. It did not, fortunately. And then I did the tape design. Now, with the tape design, I used kind of wider paint tape on the center to get this nice big kind of racing stripe look. And then on the sides, I did a thinner tape. It's actually this really thin green masking tape. It's like a 1/4 inch or something, if that. And it's tape that I use for fretboards when I'm doing fret jobs, so that I can tape in between up here and not have to worry about cutting the tape. And unfortunately, the tape did not hold the line super well, particularly on the side stuff. It just, I probably could have done a better job taping it, but I didn't want to get too neurotic about it. It's a cheap guitar and it's a project, and so I just kind of reminded myself, don't get too crazy. So I taped it up, and then I sprayed a coat of blue over top of that. Went on really well, got good coverage. Then I went ahead after 30 minutes, sprayed another coat of blue, good coverage. And then I waited about 12 hours, and again, very lightly scuff sanded it, just to make sure everything was dry. I did my best to kind of avoid the yellow areas, because I didn't want to create any more ridge than was already going to be there from having 2 layers of paint. That came out pretty good. It was already pretty close to flat before I did any clear. So then after I did that, I waited another 48 hours. Very careful about that, because I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get any weird paint reactions. And then I did clear. Now, I laid on a lot more clear than I did paint, which is, if you want to get a good kind of glossy finish, that's the way you got to go about it, especially when you're dealing with kind of ridges from multiple layers of paint. I did a layer of clear coat, a coat. When I say a coat, I mean I did like, a coat is 3 passes for me. So I did a coat of clear, and then I waited 10 minutes, and this was all with the guitar hanging outside on my kind of paint stand, if you will. And it was bright and sunny and hot. That was important. I wanted to make sure that it dried. So when I came back 10 minutes later, the paint was dry to the touch. I mean, you could probably have still pushed in a fingerprint or something. It wasn't super, super hard, but I could pick the guitar up, you know, gently, and it was fine. Then I did another coat of clear. Then I waited 10 minutes. Then I did another coat of clear. So that was one coat. 3 passes, 1 coat. There were some runs a little bit because this paint, I'm not as familiar with how it works, and it's a more concentrated spray, so I learned that you had to be farther back than I would with like auto body paint like Duplicolor or, you know, Re-Ranch Nitro or something. You got to be a little farther away. Like instead of about 6 or 8 inches, it's more like 10 or 12 inches, which I think it probably says on the can. But learn anyway. Waited 12 hours, and then I level sanded it a little bit with 1000 grit paper. Again, very careful to be very light. I wet sanded it with some water with like a drop of dish soap in it. And it started to look pretty good. And then I waited 48 hours. And after 48 hours, I came back. It was already scuff sanded. Everything felt dry. I did the kind of fingernail test. All of my fingernail kind of testing I do on the neck plate, not neck plate, the neck heel underneath where the plate's going to be, or like inside the cavity. And when I say fingernail test, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's just basically like press your fingernail down into the finish, and if the finish dents, like if you can see the fingernail, then it's not dry enough to do anything with yet. This paint actually hardens pretty quickly and pretty hard. I've been surprised with the results. Like, I think this is a totally usable paint in that term so far. You know, time will tell how well it stands up and all that kind of stuff, but so far it's been pretty good. So then after those 48 hours, I did the fingernail test. It seemed hard, so I went ahead and did another coat, which was 3 passes, same thing. Spray coat 10 minutes, spray coat 10 minutes, spray coat. Let it dry for 48 hours. After 12 hours of that 48 hours, I level sanded it again with 1000 grit paper. Did it one more time. So basically 3 coats, and each coat is 3 passes, so like 9 passes of clear. Again, I still had some little runs here and there where we kind of like build up almost like a ridge. But I was laying enough of it on that I could level sand it out flat, and that came out without any problems. So then, I guess it's been about day before yesterday or something, I did the kind of like final level sand and started polishing. I started with 1000 grit paper because I'd already gotten it pretty smooth, and then I worked my way up to 1200, 1500. Each one of these I'm wet sanding. And then after I got to 1500, I switched over to micro mesh abrasive sanding pads, still wet. I used the micro mesh 1500. It's a kit you can buy from StewMac of like 1500 all the way up to like 12,000. That stuff is not exactly the same translated grit as regular wet dry paper, but I went ahead and started with that, and I went from 1500 to 1800 to whatever it is, I can't remember, all the way up to 12,000. So by the time I was done, it was already approaching gloss. Like, I mean, it was real close to being glossy. And then before I buffed it, I let it dry for around 12 hours, overnight. I did it, you know, did the level sanding at night, went to bed, and around lunchtime the next day, I got up and did the polishing. So then I did the polishing with Meguiar's kind of standard auto body buffing compound, medium cut, fine cut, and then swirl remover. All those with just soft, you know, microfiber towels. And by the time I got to the swirl remover, it had come out, I mean, you can probably kind of see it here, really nice. Now, if you get right up on this, you can still, there's some places where you can kind of see some marks and stuff. This is not a factory good finish. I don't know if I could get it that way if I spent a lot of time on it or not, maybe. But I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it because it's a cheap project guitar, and that was the whole point. But I'm very pleased with the results in the sense that the way that this looks now, everything is flat, you can't feel the ridges of the paint or anything like that. It feels good and solid. And in fact, to me, it kind of looks a little bit like Nitro. Like it looks like a guitar that had Nitro sprayed on it. It's a little bit older and has just aged a little bit. So that ended up being cool because I think that fits the motif of the guitar. So then I was pretty much done with the body. I just kind of let it sit. Now let's talk about the neck. So the neck, I had been working on, basically I staggered the way I was working on this stuff. So when I was waiting for the finish to dry on the body, I would be working on the neck. So kind of like one day would be neck, one day would be body. So in between those, I did the same kind of thing on the neck. You saw in the first video that I stained the neck to give it that nice kind of vintage amber look like the old Fenders have. That took pretty well. It took me a couple of tries to get it to soak in to something I was happy with. And then I started doing coats of clear. I didn't do nearly as much clear on the neck with the exception of the front of the headstock. I did like basically 2 coats of clear, but I was a little bit more aggressive with my level sanding. So it's sealed, but then I buffed it down, kind of sanded it down with steel wool so that it was a satin finish. So the neck, it is sealed, but it kind of feels a little bit like bare wood because it's real smooth. But the front of the headstock, I really laid into with clear. And the reason for that is that I had this awesome Waterslide decal made by a company called Stringcraft. I will leave a link to them in the description, or this guy. He was very, very cool. He did exactly what I wanted him to do. He sent me some very cool water slides and multiples in case I screwed up, and which is good because one of them I did screw up. Waterslide decals are hard, I think, if you want them to look right. But see if you can get it up where you can see it here. So it says Vault Tech, where it would normally say Fender, but in the kind of Fender font. And underneath that it says Vault 210. 210 is my house number, so that's just kind of a stupid thing. And then there's a little Vault Boy there. Those are all water slides. If I turn it in the light, you can see, I mean, it's got a lot of gloss on it. You can kind of still see the outline of the water slide. And I could have buried it even more in the clear, but I would have had to go buy some more clear coat, and I just didn't want to do that. And I kind of was, pretty happy with the way it turned out, so I just decided to leave it. This clear on the headstock, because I laid it on so thick, is still not 100% cured, so it's going to be a little bit still before I put anything on the headstock as far as hardware is concerned, because I just want to make sure it's totally cured before I do that. But it came out really cool looking, I think. So you can see it's got a nice gloss on it there. But again, not so much that it looks like it's dipped in plastic, but it's got a solid coat of gloss, and the decals are protected, so they're not going to go anywhere. And I think it matches the body nicely. Let's see what else. Oh, I painted the neck plate with that same yellow paint. I didn't use clear on this. This is, again, when I was doing the neck days, I was doing the plate as well. So I just did, before I did the neck plate, I sanded it with, I want to think 600 grit, enough to where that I was starting to see the chrome finish come off, and I was starting to see that kind of brown, copper, brass look underneath it, so that it was really good and scuffed. And then I did yellow, waited 30 minutes, did some more yellow, waited 30 minutes, did some more yellow. And then I left it, and each time I would come back to do the neck, same thing. So you really can't see, it did say Squier here, but this filler stuff pretty well covered it up. So it just looks like a yellow neck plate now. And it's kind of a satin finish, because I only sanded it up to about 1,000 grit or 1,200 grit, just because I wanted it to look, kind of satiny. There's some places where I bolted the screws in where you could see the paint kind of coming up a little bit from where it got down in the screw holes. And so I'll probably have to scrape that off. But all in all, it came out pretty cool. That's kind of where we're at right now. I went ahead and put the neck on the guitar after I got done with polishing up the neck last night, or polishing up the headstock. And I stained the fingerboard a little bit with India ink, so it's sort of ebonizing it. I just wanted to darken it a little bit to make it look a little bit more like Brazilian or something. And I'm really happy with the way that came out. You can still see it's rosewood. It doesn't look completely like glass black like ebony does, like old ebony. But it darkened it up some, and I think that looks really good. And then I went over, after I did that, I went over the fretboard, starting at like 1,000 grit all the way up to like 3,000 grit. So it's really smooth and it feels great under your fingers. Clean the frets off, all that good stuff. I also, the ebony dye stuff, just like a drop, I kind of got on a paper towel and got it good and worked in, and then I kind of just very gently worked a little bit into the neck because I wanted it to kind of look a little bit played in, just a little bit. That stuff doesn't really take super hard if you really thin it out like I did. So so that came out really cool. So you can, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a little bit of a dark tint to the neck, as if you had been playing it and the oil from your hands gets into the maple and kind of makes it look like that. Because that's, if you have a bare maple neck, it will do that. I put the bridge back on, went ahead and put the bridge ground wire back. I used the same one that came with the guitar because it just fit right, and it's, you know, it's just a bridge ground. I changed the saddles, which I was planning on doing from the beginning anyway. There's nothing wrong with the saddles that were on the guitar, but those are kind of like pop metal. So I wanted something that was a little bit more toneful. So I used some saddles off of a PRS S2 tremolo. I had replaced the guitar, or SE tremolo, it's the same thing, but I had replaced that with a real PRS bridge. So I had this trim lying around, and these are good saddles. They're solid steel as far as I can tell. And so I put them on there. They don't sit totally flush or down on the top without string pressure, but because the guitar is a string through and it's going to have a good break angle that way, I don't think that's going to be an issue. If it is, I've got some Graphtec saddles and I've got some other stuff that we could try, but I really like the way these look and I like the way these saddles feel, so I'm hoping that's going to work out okay. So we'll see. The other thing I did while I was doing the neck and the neck plate is also painted the pick guard. Same thing. This was the original black pick guard. So what I did is same kind of thing. I sanded it down with like 1000 grit to just get the gloss off of it so that it would be nice and you know, enough scuffed up that you could hit it with paint and it would stick. 2 coats of yellow. Probably could have done 1, but went with 2. Level sanded it a little bit after 12 hours. Waited 48 hours. I hit this with 1 coat of clear, like 1 coat is 3 passes. So, and then I just, you know, did the kind of sand polish thing. I didn't want to make it look too nice because then it would look like paint and not like plastic, I guess, if that makes sense. So it's still got some kind of marks and stuff in it, but it's going to get that anyway from me playing the guitar. So anyway, let's put it on the guitar here. So that's a pretty good approximation of what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. And because I use the same paint, it matches the color perfectly, which is exactly what I wanted. It really offsets and makes the guitar look super vibey and vintage. This is already a cool kind of retro guitar design, the Jazzmaster offset body. So really happy with how that turned out. And that's pretty much the rundown on everything I have done to it so far. This much of the guitar is essentially done. Like I said, the headstock gloss is maybe just a little bit soft still, so I'm letting that dry some more. I'm seeing this dent in the headstock where I accidentally knocked it over a minute ago. You know, came out really good. So let's talk about what else needs to be done to the guitar. So I still have to do the electronics. That's the main thing. And then I'll have to, of course, do the setup and any kind of tweaks to get it right. I wanted to keep the guitar's price point thing down because this is kind of an experiment. It's a cheap guitar. I wanted to see what I could do. But ultimately, I decided after I had been, you know, going through my pickup drawers and looking like that, everything I had was kind of modern-y looking. And I felt like if I put like a crunch lab with the bar and the Allen pieces and everything, it would kind of detract from the sort of vibey, vintagey thing. So I bought some pickups for it. However, because I wanted to keep the price down, I went with Guitar Fetish pickups, or GFS pickups, because they're pretty inexpensive in comparison. So I bought a pair of lipstick tube humbuckers. So they're not here yet, but they basically, they just look like it's a humbucker base plate with 2 lipstick pickups. And to me, I think that's just going to have the cool kind of retro looking thing. And I've read good stuff about the pickups. I've played through some GFS pickups before, and I thought they sounded pretty good. And these I thought were really cool. So those are what's going to go in here. They'll be the kind of chrome lipstick humbuckers. And that works great too because they don't have like enough of a cover that I'd have to do anything to the pick guard itself. Oh, speaking of which, I should mention too, I went to the length of making sure you see the edges. You can still see the ply on the pick guard where it goes black, white, black. I didn't tape that off because it would have been near impossible to tape that off and get it to look right. So I just sprayed the whole thing, I let it get yellow, and then I used, I have some kind of like cabinet scrapers that I use for wood, and I just went back and just cleanly scraped the edge, and that worked out really, really well. So, and then I didn't scrape the clear, I just sanded it. So, you know, once you get up on it, you can see the kind of trim there, which I think is a nice touch. So I think what I'm going to do with those pickups, they're wound kind of hot from what I understand. Like I think the bridge is about 13K, the neck is maybe like 9 or 10K or something like that. It's not always a direct indicator of how hot the pickup is, but supposedly they're wound pretty hot. And the reason that's good is because I wanted to be able to get them in kind of a single coil operation as well. So I think what I'm going to do is, Seymour Duncan has a wiring schematic that I've done a couple of times before, and it's really meant for P-rails. And if you have two on double pull double throw switches, whether they're push pulls or toggle switches, I think I'm going to use toggle switches, depending on how you set the combination of them, you can get either your outer coils, your inner coils, your humbuckers running in parallel mode, or your humbuckers running in series mode. It's just, you know, how if you have both switches up, both switches down, one up, one down, whatever, that kind of thing. And that works really well. It's a little bit of a complicated thing, but I think I'm going to go with that route so that I just hopefully can get some really cool, neat lipstick tube tones. And I was thinking about doing the out of phase thing, but I think probably with all the options I'm going to get with that, I won't need it. So I think I'm actually just going to use the stock pots. I'm going to wire it up 50 style. Maybe put a treble bleed in, we'll see if it needs it or not. And then do that, kind of get it going. And after I do that, let's see what else. Oh, I bought a couple other parts too. I bought a new nut for this, also from Guitar Fetish. It was really cheap. It's like their polycarbonate stuff, and it was like $1 and some change or something for the for the nut, so I threw that in there. And I bought a roller string tree for this. I don't know that I'm actually going to need it because I also bought locking tuners from Guitar Fetish as well. I know I said I wasn't going to spend a bunch of money on the guitar, and I've already spent some money on it. But after it's all said and done, I still, with the paint and the supplies and everything, have less than like it's about $350 in the guitar parts and everything. It's just mostly my labor. And then, so I've got these, they're top locking tuners, kind of the PRS style, where there's a little divot in the top that you can use like a coin or a pick or something to tighten them down. And I believe they're staggered as well, so I may not actually need the string tree. We'll see. But I did order a roller string tree just in case, because one, it looks cool and it would be slightly better tuning stability. I'm not terribly worried about the tuning since it's not a trim on the guitar. So it's going to get the lipstick pickups, you know, probably a couple toggle switches to do all the switchy stuff. I think I'm probably going to turn the pickup toggle up and down instead of left and right. It's just personal preference. But I really like the placement. When I do the toggle switches, I'm probably going to have to do a little bit of routing on the body to get those to sit right in a place that is comfortable for me. I haven't decided exactly where yet, but probably what I'm going to do is just kind of mark it off and do it by hand with the Dremel, just enough to get the switches in there. I don't want to put anything like with my actual router base on the guitar because I don't want it to scuff up the finish, because I can kind of just tape it off and just do a little bit with the Dremel and we'll be fine. We'll see. If it looks like it's going to be a real pain, I could just use push-pull pots and not modify anything. So, I don't know. We'll see when we get to that. Then we'll put the nut on. It should be pretty much a drop-in replacement for this. This is a 42 millimeter wide nut, so they had a drop-in replacement. I'll have to do, of course, some height adjustment and get the slots and everything. Put the tuners on, and it's going to get strap locks. All my guitars get strap locks. Just the Dunlop variety. I prefer those. Not that they're necessarily better, that's just what I've always used, and so all my straps have those on them and just makes everything interchangeable. So yeah, that's where we're at with the blue guitar right now. I'm just really, really happy with how it's come out so far. I like the way this finish has looked. I mean, I don't know exactly, like I said, how well it will age. I don't know, we'll see. It feels pretty durable, but it feels kind of like, I don't want to say sticky, but it's not, PRS finishes, even though they're super high gloss like this, you can pretty well just run your hand over it and there's no friction, nothing. I guess this just has zero porous quality to it. This feels a lot more like nitrocellulose, where it kind of, depending on the temperature and the humidity in your hands and stuff, you might stick a little bit. But I also think that might make it wear in a cool way, like wherever my arm rides. And since this is kind of the post-apocalyptic vibe thing that the whole game and all this stuff is about, I think the kind of letting it get a little dingy might be cool. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. I'm going to keep working on it. I'm waiting on that package from GFS with the pickups and the nut and the tuners and all that stuff. So by the time that gets here, I would think probably I will be good to go ahead and start putting it together. I'm going to put 11 gauge strings on it rather than the 9 to 42s that came on it, because 9s are just too small for me. If the 11s feel too big, I'll put 10s on it. I don't think they're going to. I use 11s on my Strat and they feel good. So anyway, one more time. There's our pick guard. That's pretty much what it's going to look like. Just it's going to have chrome lipstick humbuckers here. And either, I'm kind of thinking maybe I'll put the toggle switches like right here-ish, side by side, so that I can just kind of flick them. We'll see. And then, you know, put the pots in, all that good stuff. I like that everything mounts to the pick guard here. That makes all this stuff a lot easier. You do have to use, because of that, you do have to use like a right angle cable if you want to have it kind of be out of the way, but that's not a huge deal. So yeah, there we go. That's where we're at right now. One more shot of the cool headstock logo there. Like I said, I'll leave a link to in the description to this guy's Etsy store, Stringcraft, craft with a K. Very cool. He was, you know, easy to communicate with. The decal got to me very quickly. He did exactly what I wanted to do. It turned out beautiful. And he sent multiple copies of each thing, so in case I messed up, because I did actually on the first time I tried to do the little vault buoy up here at the tip of the headstock, it crinkled on me and I couldn't get it to uncrinkle, so I had to like pull it off and do it again. But he sent me like 8 of those little vault buoys in different sizes, so ultimately decided on that one. And I think it's going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to putting this all together and seeing what everything looks like. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this, and I will do another update once I get the next set of parts in and start getting it together, and probably by that point I'll be able to put it together and at the end of it do a demo for you, and you can kind of see what it sounds and looks like and get the whole vibe from the guitar then. So far I think this has been a very fun project. I haven't spent that much time on it. It's mostly waiting more than anything, just for the paint to be ready to work on. And I think it's going to be cool. So anyway, thanks for watching. Until next time, I will catch you later.